Look at us. Braving the elements. All right. Good deal. I say, hope it gets better, but looked at the forecast, it doesn't look that way, does it? But that's all right. That's all right. You got to expect it, I guess. If you would make your way to Exodus chapter 13, we're gonna start in verse 17 here in just a little bit. It's been a couple of weeks, but I had a question that was brought up after the last class, because the last class was Israel leaving Egypt. And I think the text says 600,000 men on foot, right? Not to mention women and children. So there's estimates of how many people leave. And I've kind of settled in my mind, and I'm going to say this, and you can take this for what it's worth. I'm much more interested in theology than in archaeology. So more about what it is this says about God than how the history all lines up with it. But I've kind of settled at around the 2 million mark. You know, that would be about that, between 1.5 and 2 million people. And so the question came, Bob actually asked me, are there any estimates on what was the population of Egypt, right, before then? And that's a hard one to track down because there's not a lot of historical record, but the estimates range. And if you look, they range widely, but a lot will say they think that the population was around 4 million. So about half the country that exits, which, would be pretty detrimental, especially with the rest of the loss that you're getting ready to face that we're going to read about here in just a little bit, all right? So chapter 13 talks more about the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. It does talk about the redemption of the firstborn. And the reasoning behind that, is that the firstborn is what it cost to get Israel out, right? The firstborn of all of Egypt is what the cost was paid to get them out. And so the firstborn belongs to God, and they need to redeem the firstborn, right? Just like God has redeemed Israel, his firstborn, all right? But I want us to move on and get down here to verse 17 as we get ready. This is just great stuff. All right. Verse 17, chapter 13. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea, and the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt equipped for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here. They moved on from Sukkot and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, and did not depart from before the people. Okay, lots of little things. This says that he didn't want to lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines. Now this has led Old Testament scholars to say this was compiled later, because the Philistines weren't there. Right, and maybe there's something to that, right? Maybe there is something to that as this gets passed down, from generation to generation. However, that's not the important thing. The important thing is where God takes them. There's a way that they can go, and there's several different names for it, but it's a very popular route that they can take to get from Egypt to make it over to Canaan. But God doesn't take them that way, and the stated purpose is that I don't want them to be discouraged when they run into trouble, right, when they see war. Because that little section of land, by the way, it's still one of those little sections of land that's fought over. And especially then, because this is the main way to get from Egypt over there, right? If you go around where God's going to take them around is much, much harder. But this is the short route, and God's not going to take them that way. He's going to take them the other direction, right? And then it says that they marched out equipped for war. Now, or equipped for battle. They are, at some point, very quickly into the journey, they engage in battle. So they have some equipment of some kind. But most of the folks that I've read in about this little thing right here is more about the formation that they take, that they march in companies, right? As if that's where they're headed. All right? But we also see this other little thing here of the pillar of before we get to that, let's don't miss the tie back to the end of Genesis. And we take the bones of Joseph. Right? Because that was what he said. God's going to visit you, and God's going to bring you out of here, so you take me with you when you go. You take me home. And they do. And I think it's in Joshua 24, where it's mentioned again, where he's home, where Joseph is home. But the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. And the writer here says it did not leave them. And that's kind of a look forward, because this is going to stay with them all the way through the journey. They can travel by day, they can travel by night, and this is what's going to lead them. Now, here we go. Let's get to the fun stuff. Chapter 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-Zephon. Then you shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land, the wilderness has shut them in, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart. He will pursue them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and all the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did so. We've not gotten away from this, okay? And we're not going to get away from this, because this is part of the purpose of Israel, is to introduce Yahweh to the rest of the nations. And God starts making the introductions in Egypt, right? With the judgment on the gods of Egypt through the plagues, and then he will say, I am going to execute judgment on the gods of Egypt, and he does it here again. I'm going to get glory over Pharaoh so that the Egyptians, the rest of the Egyptians, are going to know who led you out of here, right? This seems to be the whole purpose of this. So when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people, and they said, "What's this we've done? That we've let Israel go from serving us? Half your country's gone, and that was the half that did all the work. So that's a problem, right?" So he made ready his chariot, took his army with him, took 600 chosen chariots, and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel, while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, and his horsemen, and his army, and overtook them and camped at the sea by Pi-Hahiroth, in front of Baal-Zephon. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not what we said to you when we were in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Okay, let's just stop there for a second. We've read a bunch of this, right? Read through the Exodus. Did I miss something? Other than, there's a little dust up at the beginning, right? So God meets Moses at the burning bush, and he sends him back. When Moses and Aaron come back and they tell the people that God has has visited them, that he has said, I'm going to make good on the promise to Abraham, that they bowed their head and worshiped, right? Then we have a little bit of a problem, right? When Pharaoh increases the labor, they get a little bit fussy, right? Which, who wouldn't? Every one of us would. But that kind of gets ironed out, right? And they watch as all of this happens and unfolds in front of them. And when Moses tells them about what's going to happen when it comes to Passover, they bow their head and worship. I've missed somewhere the conversation where they told Moses, we really don't want to go, just let us stay. Right? Now, maybe, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem likely. However, sometimes it's much easier to look at where we've been in the past with rose-colored glasses. How about that? It wasn't so bad. You're having trouble living out these commands of Jesus, but it wasn't so bad whenever we didn't have to do that before. Why couldn't we just stay there? Huh? We do have that in us, don't we? That instead of where God is calling us to go forward where we don't really know, or it may be difficult, we'd rather go, you know what, it's easier back here. I mean, sure, there was a whole genocide thing and slavery, but hey, at least we knew what we were doing, right? We knew how to live. This is going to be different. And so they complain. Now, this is the first of many. And it almost gets tiresome, and you got to think it does for Moses. But just for us reading it, of the number of times that they whine about something. But now this is more than just whining about something, okay? You have the Egyptian army. All the chariots, all the horsemen, Pharaoh himself are right there, right? It's easy to panic. Anybody else? Right? And it's what we do when we panic that seems to be the problem, right? And so their response is much like ours sometimes, right? If I can avoid this, then I can just go back to where I was. And then I don't have to panic anymore. Right? But here we go. Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. The Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again." I have a lot of these, but this may be my absolute favorite. My absolute favorite. I don't know. I have to narrow it down. Maybe my absolute favorite verse. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Right? I've got this. Just watch. There you go. How about that? We'll get into some more of that in not very long down the road. But on the complaining side, it amazes me that God keeps doing this even when they're complaining. Right? Because he's going to do this more and more, and they're going to keep complaining. Right? The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go in after them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts and his chariots and his horsemen. All the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen." There it is again, right? We're not getting away from that. The angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. The pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud, and the darkness, and it lit up the night, without one coming near the other all night. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. The people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued, went in after them in the midst of the sea, and all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire of cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them. For the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. The people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, so the people feared the Lord. They believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. We talked about this a couple weeks back about the connection of Passover and the way that it makes its way through Scripture, right down to us. I don't want us to miss this one. Okay? Because this does too. The broad strokes of this, and we're not into the details yet until we get a little bit further in, but the broad strokes of this are: God calls Israel out of Egypt, leads them to a place that they're not certain how they're going to get out, right? They understand that they're absolute dire need for them, and then he leads them through the water, and the next move is going to be to Sinai, right? Where we will hear him say, "You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings to be my people." We're going to fast forward several centuries, and we're going to watch Israel again, represented by none other than Jesus of Nazareth, enter the water to hear God say, "You are mine." Israel goes through the water and will be led into the desert. Jesus goes through the water and will be led into the desert as faithful Israel. And the connection I hope we don't miss, and I hope we don't just gloss over, is the connection to our own baptism and the crossing of the Red Sea. That God calls us through the water to be called his people. I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole, but sometimes I think we get the impression, or we have been given the impression, or maybe we hang on to it, that this idea of baptism is this new thing, right? It's a New Testament thing. It's not. It's ancient. And we can see roots all the way back to here. probably past there. If we want to go back past there, we could go all the way to Noah, couldn't we? Or what the water does in the days of Noah is wash away all of the evil. Right? With the righteous being brought through the other side. And the same thing here. That all of the things that enslaved Israel is now lost in the water. But Israel goes through. Okay? And in this, I don't want to get away from this verse either. That the Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Baptism is God's action and not mine. Right? The primary actor in salvation from Noah to the Red Sea to all the way through is God. Yes? And we need only shut up and do what he asks. Now that's harder than it sounds, but that's the truth, isn't it? Right? You need only watch what I do. You need only go when I say. And everything that has been gnawing at you is back there. Now when we get, there's just too much of this, right? But when we get to Moses' warning to Israel as they get ready to go into Canaan toward the end of Deuteronomy. It's not an accident, right? That he says, don't go back to Egypt, right? As if they were wanting to, which maybe some of them were. Who knows? They've been fickle all the way through. Maybe they were then. But more important than that, don't go back to where you were enslaved. There's no need for that. Because I've brought you here to someplace new. Right? This, we are connected to this ancient story of God, right? As soon as we enter the water. So, can we remember that as we talk to folks and have questions about this kind of thing, right? The way this connects us all the way back through. We watched God fight for Israel through this and going between them and Egypt. And whatever it is that he does to the Egyptian chariots, whatever he does to the ones who are trying to get out. I mean, it sounds like God shoves them back in some way or another, right? But in all of this, right, and all of this is for God to be known to the nations. God to be known to Israel, and what we'll get to very shortly is for Israel to carry that same mission as they go towards Canaan. That God is known. All right? So, we got a little bit of time. That's good, because I want to get to chapter 15. I just want to read this. It may be a rather long reading, but just follow along with me. Chapter 15, we'll start in verse 1. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my Father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host he cast into the sea, and his chosen officers were sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shatters the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrow your adversaries. You send out your fury. It consumes them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The floods stood in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil, my desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, and my hand shall destroy them. You blew with your wind, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength into your holy abode. The people have heard. They tremble. Pangs have seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Now are the chiefs of Edom dismayed. Trembling seizes the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Terror and dread fall upon them because of the greatness of your arm. They are still as a stone, till your people, O Lord, pass by, till the people pass by whom you have purchased. You will bring them in and plant them on your own mountain, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. Okay, I got a quick question. What's your favorite church song? Amazing Grace. We got one there. That's not everybody's, is it? I mean, huh? How great thou art. Seek ye first. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Right? We've got them. Now here's the big question. Why? Why is that your favorite? Meaning of the words. I wasn't planning on this. Let's try something. O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made. Okay, stop there. We know it, right? We know that? If I started Amazing Grace, would we know that one? Right? If I started Seek Ye First, would we know that one? Right? There's something about singing. There's just something about music, period. Right? If I really wasn't planning on this, so I'm not going to do this one. But think about this. You can hear the first part of a commercial jingle and finish it. Right? Because it sticks in your head. Right? That tune gets stuck in your head. Here's another one. Oh, we're not singing, so don't panic. We have been known, and I think rightly so, okay? We have been known for people who value a cappella singing, right? Could I suggest the reason why? Because we see it happen here. I don't know if this is a cappella or if it's not a cappella. I don't care. What does Israel do as soon as they see their rescue? They sing. I don't know. I really don't. I mentioned this a little while ago. They talked about the land of the Philistines, of how long this book survives as an oral tradition versus being written down. I don't know. But I gotta think this, that for a long time, the people of Israel sang this song before it was written down. Because of the meaning of the words, and because it helps them remember who they are and what God has done. We gather in here and we sing. And I hope that's the reason that we do it. right? Not just because, well, God said sing and I've got to check the right box, right? But there's something to this. Just like our baptism connects us to this ancient story of God, so does the things like singing connects us to the ancient story of the people of God, where we sing, remembering who we are, what it is that God has done for us, and where we're headed. Right? I'm a big proponent of this, of a cappella, because of the fact that it is each of us singing with one another. Right? That it's more theological than anything. How about that? Speaking of that, I was talking to a friend of mine. We're talking about different designs for church buildings. And he brought this up, and I thought, okay, I got to remember this. That the auditorium for the church ought to look like a concert hall. He goes, because that's what we're doing. We're singing to the one who saved us. Right? And that just hit me, of going, there we are. Right? A couple of things in the song I do want us to think about. I love this. Verse 9. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire will have its fill of them. I'll draw my sword, and my hand will destroy them. Right? And we think about, I was just going to think about Pharaoh, his at least 600 chariots, his horsemen, his armies, all that. Here they are. And we're going to draw the sword, and we're going to take care of this bunch of escaped slaves, right? And what's the very next thing? You blew on them, and they're gone. God breathed, and it's over. I love that. Here's another thing that we ought to pay attention to that's going to come into play later on, especially when they get to Sinai and as Israel makes their travels through. Okay? Verse 11. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, and doing wonders? For 430 years, and I think that's what it says back a couple of chapters. For 430 years, Israel has been enslaved in Egypt. Egypt, who has a god for every occasion, okay? Right? I mean, there's a lot of Egyptian gods. And Israel has been in that for generations, witnessing this. And I think I may be wrong, wouldn't be the first time, but I think it's safe to say that Israel's view of the gods at this point, and actually will be moving forward for a while, is that there are many, but that Yahweh is the most high of those, is the ruler of all the gods. Now, right, we know there are no other gods. Yes? Okay, good. All right, good deal. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with that one, right? There are no other gods. But I want us to notice that God doesn't correct them here. Right? Even arguably when we get to chapter 20 and the first of the commandments, that you will have no other gods before me, when there are no others. That God is willing to put up with teaching them from what they know. How about that? He accommodates Israel in this belief. Okay? It's going to come out, and it's going to get more pronounced, and he's going to say, there are no others. But for right now, that may be too much for them. Right now, what they need to know is, this is the one we're going to hold on to. And part of the demonstration of what God has done in Egypt against the gods of Egypt through the plagues, and as he has said at least twice in what we've read this morning, is for Israel's sake, for them to know that there is no one but him. That whatever other gods that are claimed, nothing compares to him. Now, God is willing to accommodate, right, Israel so that they can understand. So before we get too smug, right, God is also willing to accommodate us. We may know quite a bit more. I hope we know quite a bit more, right, as far as about God and his person and the people coming out of Egypt that day. But God still will accommodate us, right, so that we can understand him through what we see around us. I don't remember where this is other than it's in Joshua somewhere where it says that God commands the sun to stand still, right? Does anybody remember this one? Right. God didn't say, right? They didn't say, God commanded the earth to stop spinning on its axis. Because they would have had no idea what that meant. Right? For them, they see the same things we do, right? Is, well, we seem to be stationary and the sun's going this way. Right? That actually gets people in trouble, right? In the Middle Ages, of going, no, actually the earth revolves around the sun. They went, no, and they went back to this. Went back to places like this, going, no, it says God told the sun to stand still. It's like, because they didn't know any better, right? I mean, this is what they saw. But this was a way of God to communicate with them so that they would understand it, right? God's done this for a long time. You may think of maybe the most famous example of God accommodating us to learn who he is. I may have worded that poorly. Probably did. What about the incarnation? What about the coming of Jesus? So that we can understand who God is by watching him as he is one of us. It amazes me. It really does. As we think through things like this in these Old Testament passages and all the ways that God's done this, of God's absolute, sovereign, majestic power, willing to accommodate himself to us so we can understand who he is. Isn't that something? As Israel starts out, the first things they run into, or one of the first things they do, start to whine. And we can give them a pass. Can't we give them a pass on that one? I mean, they're out of Egypt, and all of a sudden the Egyptian army's behind them. We can give them a pass there. But it doesn't end there, right? They keep whining, even after they've seen all the things that they've seen. And we sit back and we go, how can these people do this, right? How can they be so silly, right? They just keep whining. They've seen all the stuff that God's done, and they just keep whining, they keep complaining, and they go on. And then we don't even stop to think and look in the mirror every once in a while and go, and we're sitting here complaining, and we've seen everything that they have, plus stuff that they didn't see yet. Right? Bill. Right. 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 That's right. Right. It just seems to be, right? It seems to be that thing that we kind of started with of going, we can look back and going, oh, it wasn't so bad. Yeah, Egypt wasn't so bad. The bell's not so bad, right? Yeah. Matter of fact, it's really good for you all. All right. Let's just, I do want to do this real quick. Let's start in verse 22. Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea. They went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them, saying, if you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what it is right in his eyes, give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. And they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water, 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the water. We'll dive into some more of this next week. But it's interesting, right? The first place God leads them is a place where there's no water. And then when they get there, there's no water. They can't drink it. And so here we are again. Here we are again with Israel. What are we going to drink? What are you going to do about it? Right? And God goes, here's water. I'll fix it. And then he leads them to a place where it looks like there's plenty. Israel's going to spend 40 years, okay, 40 years learning what it means to be led by God. They're going to have to spend 40 years learning to trust that he's got their best interest at heart, and he starts it right off the bat. They're going, you're going to depend on me, right? I also find this, and we'll see this again really soon, is that I think it's Pete Enns in his commentary that talks about this, and I really like it because I think it plays out well, is that what we see in the relationship with God and Israel is much like parent and child, okay? And at this stage of the game, Israel is a newborn, right? And you all know this, who are parents know this, that newborns are the most inconsiderate people on the planet, right? They do not care what you're doing. They don't. They don't care if you got other things to do. They don't care if you're tired. Doesn't matter to them. What they know is that they're hungry, right? Or that they need change, right? Or they need something. And we don't sit down with newborns, or those of us who are sane, don't sit down with newborns and go, now listen, here's how this is going to work, right? What do? We shut them up, right? We get them what they need. And we watch God do this with Israel. Now, as the relationship matures, and you're going to see it mature a little bit more when he gets to Sinai, there's going to be, okay, I've taken care of you, and I'm going to continue to take care of you, but now here's your responsibility in this. And it's going to keep moving in that direction, because that's what he's after, is for them to mature. And by the way, something else that's not changed. That's what God's after with us, is to mature. All right? All right, we're going to stop there because I think, oh man, I'm right on time. Look at me go. All right, let's pray. Father, we love you, and we thank you so much for who you are, for the ways that you've revealed yourself to us, the ways that you continue to do that, that you want us as your people, and that you want those who are around us to be acquainted with you by the way that we conduct ourselves. We're thankful for your rescue. Without you, we would have perished a long time ago. We thank you for your hand that continues to guide us, for the ways that you continue to guide us, and we ask, Father, for the eyes to see it and the courage to follow. We're thankful that we can gather here as your people and remember the great things that you have done on our behalf. And may we allow those things to change us moving forward. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.